We hold these truths to be self-evident that we are all created equal, that we are endowed with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This iconic passage from the Declaration of Independence is one of the most influential in all of history. The idea that some rights are so ingrained in human nature that they cannot possibly be taken away shapes every modern democracy. But the Founding Fathers were wrong. If this past year has taught me anything, it's that our rights are always on the ballot. And to prove that, I'd like to use Afghanistan as a case study. This is an article about women's rights in Afghanistan from Amnesty International. There are a few key takeaways that we can get from this article. One is that throughout the early 20th century, a lot of Middle Eastern countries were attempting to modernize to keep up with Western society. Women were granted the right to vote in Afghanistan in 1919. This was before World War II and before women in the United States were given the right to vote. For the next 30-ish years, there was a progressive ideology in the Middle East regarding women's rights and a focus on incorporating and growing women's rights in Middle Eastern countries such as Afghanistan. This all changed in 1994 when the Taliban took over. And in a single generation, all of the progress that women had made in the Middle East, where they were able to go to school, work, have jobs, live relatively free lives, were completely overturned by an oppressive theocratic state. You may argue that since Afghanistan is not a democratic country, that we shouldn't be using them as a case study. I disagree vehemently, mostly because in 2022, we saw that the Supreme Court of the United States overturned 50 years of constitutional precedent when they made the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade. Next, I would like to take a look at this article from the American Bar Association addressing that very removal of human rights in the US. The parade of horribles that may lie ahead is terrifying. Any existing law related to privacy, contraception, same-sex marriage, and interracial marriage is at risk, as are protections for anything that may rely on substantive due process for its protection. The whole point of stare decisis is to bring some predictability and stability to our case law. When the Supreme Court demonstrates that it is voting more on ideological lines rather than adherence to its past decisions, as it did in Dobbs, there is reason to question whether rights, such as the right to marriage equality, may be taken away. Obergefell v. Hodges, the case that established the right for couples to marry, regardless of sexual orientation, was decided only 8 years ago, which makes it much more unsettled compared to almost 50 years of precedent for Roe. So what we have is an example of a theologically driven, ultra-conservative Supreme Court making decisions to retract rights that were previously given to its citizens for the first time in US history. This being fairly analogous to the retraction of women's rights in Afghanistan in the 90s. And I want to emphasize how damaging this decision has been for women in America. I want to take a look at this article, which looks at the association between restrictive abortion laws and suicide in women. So this was from 2023, and it compares data from across US history for the past 40 or so years, looking at states that had particularly restrictive abortion laws. So we want to skip right down to the results section. 21 US states enforced at least one trap law between 1974 and 2016. Annual rates of death by suicide ranged from 1.4 to 25.6 per 100,000 women of reproductive age. to 2.7 to 33% per 100,000 women of post-reproductive age during the study period. The annual motor vehicle crash death rates among women of reproductive age were 2.4 to 42, and enforcement of trap laws was associated with higher suicide rates among reproductive aged women, but not women of post-reproductive age. So that means that the restrictive abortion laws had a significant impact on women who would be impacted by those laws. In recent months, we've been talking about the women who die because they aren't able to get access to abortion care due to pregnancy complications. But I have yet to see a conversation about the women who die because of this increased suicide rate. I've yet to hear a conversation about how the lack of access to an abortion or the stripping of their women's rights greatly impacts their mental health, and how that also is costing women in America their lives. It's a shame that women today have less rights than their parents or their grandparents or any generation before them that came after 1950. I think it's a shame that we gave the person who enabled this a second chance. And I think it's a shame that when push comes to shove, people will always try to take the rights of those that they don't agree with away. And for the last case study, I would just like to bring even more attention to Premier Danielle Smith's attempt at submitting 3 new bills that target trans youth. Again, further taking away the liberties of children. So, the Founding Fathers were wrong. Our rights are only unalienable if the people in charge believe that they are. And it is our duty, as responsible citizens, to continue to elect people who believe in our rights, not just theirs. Please like and subscribe, and let me know what you thought about this content in the comments.